Writing takes many forms, especially in these days of email, texting, and tweeting. Even among more conventional styles of writing, however, there is enormous variety. Business reports, lab reports, letters of recommendation, memos, press releases, application letters, exam essays, grant proposals. And it is also the case that new writing genres and writing situations arise all the time. It is likely that you may someday have a job that includes writing a kind of document that has not yet been invented. There is no way to anticipate all the nuances and factors that will inform the kinds of writing we will all be doing in the future. But fortunately, there are some universal rules that are always in play. These rules are grounded in the dynamics of human communication, dynamics which are intuitively accessible to anyone who's ever had a conversation with another human being. One of these dynamics is the principle that communication is always more effective when the participants agree on a shared set of conventions. When I wave hello to someone, I assume that the person I am waving to knows that this gesture indicates a friendly greeting rather than, say, a sign of hostility or indifference. Likewise, when a reader reads the first sentence or the first paragraph of a piece of writing, there are certain shared expectations that help to enhance the reader's understanding. Indeed, writing relies even more heavily on these kind of conventions than face-to-face communication for obvious reasons. If my friendly wave is misunderstood, I can always try to establish my goodwill in other ways, by smiling, shaking hands, saying friendly things, etc. Whereas if a reader and writer get off on the wrong foot, the writer, who may never come into physical contact with her readers, rarely has an opportunity to shift tactics and try again. The good news is that, just like the basic conventions that govern face-to-face interaction, the rules of writing are basically intuitive and commonsensical. They emphasize clarity, precision, and repetition. When writers internalize these basic elements, they can transfer these skills to any kind of writing situation. 1. Always write in complete sentences. The grammar of the English language is based around one basic principle. Agents act. Someone does something. Something happens. A sentence in English is considered complete when both of these terms are represented: the noun, the subject of the sentence, the thing that you are writing about on one hand, and the verb, the action of the sentence, the thing you have to say about the thing that you are writing about, on the other hand. The structure of written communication itself follows a similar structure. You introduce a subject for consideration, as we are doing in this class by identifying our master topics, and then you say something about the subject. Whenever a writer in the English language is at a loss for what to say next, she can always ask herself the following two questions. 1. What am I writing about? And 2. What do I have to say about what I'm writing about? The answer to the first question will provide the first half of the sentence, and the answer to the second question will provide the second half. When writing flows well, it is in part because the stable rhythm of sentences as they move from subject phrases to verb phrases creates a forward momentum. A sentence fragment, a sentence that lacks either a subject or a verb, disrupts this momentum and leaves a dangling thought, a subject that doesn't do anything, or an action that is not done by anyone, that disrupts the forward movement of both writing and thinking. Writers will sometimes use fragments deliberately because of their interesting rhetorical effects, but in almost all cases, complete sentences are essential to effective communication. 2. Always begin with an introduction and end with a conclusion. Whenever you pay attention to something, you go through three major cognitive stages. 1. The first step in this process is obviously coming to the awareness that there is something that merits paying attention to. In this stage of attention, you are not particularly concerned with the details of whatever is pulling at your attention. The dominant principle of this stage is some kind of intellectual or emotional connection making. You may not be entirely sure exactly what you are looking at, or exactly why you are looking at it, but you get a sense that there will be some value gained by taking the time to pause and look more closely. 2. In the second stage in the process of paying attention to something, you start to collect the details, to look for inner relationships, and to develop more intricate ideas about what this thing is that has captured your attention. You examine, analyze, discriminate, and evaluate, and you gather whatever information there is to cull from the act of paying attention. 3. Finally, there is a moment when you decide to stop paying attention. This stage is frequently overlooked, but it is an important part of the process, arguably the most important part. In this stage, you conclude that you have adequately examined whatever it is that you are paying attention to, speculate on what you have learned from the encounter, and consider what you can take away from these reflections to apply to future acts of attention paying. Obviously, these three stages correspond with the stages of a typical academic essay: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. But writing of any kind also requires negotiating all three stages of this cognitive arc. Whether you are writing an email, an opera, or a blog post, you always have to take the time to introduce your topic in a way that allows readers to make a connection with what you intend to write about, and then, as you come to the end, provide readers with some final thoughts about what it has all meant. Neglecting either of these bookends is likely to compromise the clarity of a piece of writing. 3. Use paragraphs to distinguish different parts of your essay. In the same way that clear writing uses complete sentences to develop ideas, larger units of writing use paragraphs to organize related sentences into a larger block of meaning. These larger blocks of meaning can then build on one another to create an infinite variety of complex conceptual structures. When you are first sitting down to do any kind of writing project, a useful first step is to develop a list of things you have to say about your subject. Brainstorming a list of observations will probably generate some ideas that are closely related to one another, and other ideas that branch out in their own directions. You will see that some ideas are naturally nested within other ideas, and that what might at first seem like two different ideas are actually two different ways of saying the same thing. Concept webs and other forms of graphic organizers can help you find the natural patterns that exist within the different ideas you have on a given topic. You can think of paragraphs as buckets that will help you sort through this complexity. Label your buckets: ideas related to X, ideas related to Y, ideas related to Z, etc., and then try to see if you can fit all, or at least most, of your best ideas into a specific number of buckets. When you turn to writing the body of your writing project, the buckets will supply you with the content for your paragraphs, and these paragraphs provide a framework for your writing project. Thinking of your subject in terms of paragraphs helps you establish an outline for your writing project, and it helps your reader identify the connections among the different ideas you include in the piece of writing. 4. Always begin paragraphs with topic sentences and end them with concluding remarks. In the same way that the three stages of the act of paying attention to something inform the structure of a piece of writing, they also inform the structure of the individual units of a piece of writing, particularly paragraphs. A paragraph is not simply a group of sentences stuck together by a paragraph break. A paragraph has its own kind of grammar, which obeys the same principle as the grammar of a sentence. In the sentence, the subject does something, while in the paragraph, a topic sentence, the first sentence of the paragraph, introduces a thought or a main idea, and then the rest of the paragraph does something with that main idea. The body of the paragraph fulfills the same function on the paragraph level that the body of an essay fulfills at the essay level. It may supply specific examples of the ideas expressed in the topic sentence. It may provide supporting arguments defending the claim made in the topic sentence. Or it may elaborate the topic sentence's claim with a more detailed examination of the subject. Finally, when the sequence of statements following from the topic sentence has unfolded, a well-written paragraph concludes with a sentence or two that provides some element of closure to the paragraph itself. A strong paragraph-ending sentence ties together the paragraph's elements into a final statement that identifies the key takeaway points from the paragraph. Thinking about the beginning, middle, end structure of your paragraphs can help guide you through the process of writing the body of any piece of writing, even telling you on a sentence-by-sentence level how to proceed. 5. On the paragraph scale and the composition scale, begin with the most general or obvious points and move toward the more specific and less obvious points. Unlike thinking, writing and reading are both linear processes. The structure of your brain makes it so that any given thought you ever have is simultaneously interlaced with hundreds and millions of other thoughts all at the same time. Writing, however, works one sentence at a time. Whenever you decide you have two things to say, the question immediately presents itself: which one should you say first, and which one should you say second, since you can't say both of them at the same time? A professional or academic piece of writing will typically have dozens or even hundreds of individual ideas included in it, and the whole system of complete sentences arranged into structured paragraphs is designed to keep all of this content in a predictable and intelligible sequence. Part of writing effectively is knowing how to exploit the one thing at a timeness of writing to foster engagement with a reader by creating dramatic effects, an air of suspense, a feeling of building to a climax, or a sense of solving a mystery. A good storyteller sets the stage, introduces the main characters, and gets all the boring stuff out of the way right at the outset so they can move on to the more dramatic and surprising parts of the story. Once you identify the main ideas in a piece of writing, you can think about how to arrange them so they lead away from the more mundane and obvious observations and toward the more precise, original, or nuanced points. There is no standard metric for evaluating how your own ideas fall across this kind of continuum. You simply have to use your own judgment and intuition. The more carefully you consider the issue of the arrangement of your ideas into a linear sequence, the more likely you will be both to communicate successfully and to write intelligently. These 5 elements of effective writing all have one thing in common. They all require that you have some inkling of what you will write before you actually begin writing. They all stress the importance of brainstorming and outlining, and they also suggest the value of going back to a piece of writing that you have already drafted to verify that the sentences all have subjects and verbs, that the first and final paragraphs perform their rhetorical functions, that the body is divided into coherent paragraphs that all have topic sentences and concluding remarks, and that the information is sequenced effectively. Mastering these 5 simple rules will enhance the professionalism of any piece of writing you ever undertake to compose, whatever the future may bring.